Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Pageau.
The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by MediaClip, Photo Finale, and Advertech Printing. Hello again and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Pageau, and today we're joined by Jeff Gump of Gump Solutions of St. Augustine, Florida. And Jeff, you need no introduction, actually.
Well, hey, Gary, nice to talk to you. You know, it was great running into you a couple of weeks ago at SPOA.
Yeah. So before we get into SPOA and industry trends, can you just kind of do a brief overview of Gump Solutions and what you offer for the volume photography industry?
Well, Gary, about 10 years ago, I started doing coaching and different photographers. You know, if I would be around the country doing speaking sessions, people would come up and say, how can, you help my company? We do 300 schools, but we just don't do sports well. And sports is kind of my gig. And so I've taken over the last few years, I've worked with, a handful of companies, helping them in their sports program and in the consulting capacity. And then I have photographers that reach out and need help coaching. And so, I offer a year, 2-year programs. I don't really do much smaller than that, just because if people are going to come to me and ask for help, it's not something that happens overnight. It's just like anything else. Give me 12 months and I'll make a difference for you.
And you also are involved with something called Speaking Volume. Talk a little bit about that.
About 3 or 4 years ago, my pal, Eric Miller, and I decided we would, there's so many Facebook groups that are out here on the market. We decided to put a group together just talking about schools and sports. It wasn't an interaction type Facebook group. It was pretty much, we both kind of talk a little bit about what we're doing in the business and some things, tricks, different techniques that are out here that happen in our day-to-day life. And again, there's not a lot of interaction. And we've got about 1,000 members, and we come on a couple of times a week sharing what we do.
Yeah. No, I enjoy it. It's very, like you said, tips and tricks kind of thing, stuff you can look at and take away. I think Eric has mastered the short video format, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. He sure makes me look good.
So speaking of looking good, you were looking good at SPOA in Houston a couple weeks ago. It was a pleasure to see you and so many other industry members there. I think the attendance was well over 300, very well attended event. And props to the SPOA team, David Crandall and Claudia Denser and Doyce Crandall and all the other officers who made that happen. It was really kind of in my opinion, as an observer, it was really almost a throwback event to the heyday of the PSPA. But on the other hand, there was also a lot of initiatives there. And I think that's where SPOA is distinguishing itself from PSPA. And you were on hand taking some notes. Can you talk a little bit about the things the initiatives and the programs that they talked about that you think will impact the sports and schools business?
Well, first of all, as I arrived, I'd come from the MVP event for a couple of days. So basically you go across the hall and that's where SPOA was. So when you walked into the room, into the court, into the hallway area, and you saw all the banners and you saw everything was first class. I mean, it like you said, it reminded me of the PSPA days, the PMA days. I was totally impressed. They had a little gallery over with old camera gear that photographers had used over the last 100 years.
Yeah,
so it was nice, but there were different faces we were seeing.
Right,
the photographers in my peer group that I hear from on social media, talking about certain softwares or what camera equipment to buy or how to do things on Photoshop. This was a business. It was all about a group coming together and talking about the business of photography. I mean, the really neat thing is they put a group together with yearbooks.
Yeah.
Yearbooks has been the biggest hiccup in the whole industry. it's kind of a battle between photographers and yearbook companies, but it sounds like talking to each other. So I think over time, the yearbook and photographers are going to meet eye to eye and make a lot of changes. Very excited about that. IDs, another hiccup we have is, buying machines and going and having IDs and then people losing them and having to make more. And how much do you charge? Has been the standard ID kind of card. Right. And going into digital IDs. I didn't know much about that. I learned so much at this event. It was unbelievable. Accreditation, which is amazing. Something they're putting together, something that SPAA years ago, Frank Hadfield, put something together trying to do accreditation. It looks like it's coming together here with SPOA. Sony jumped on board. Got to meet Sam with Sony and, the initiative she's doing, talking about, camera gear at all these different schools that people don't use anymore, a buyback type thing, which is exciting. I didn't really know her well, but love her. I mean, I think everybody glued to her. And I just think that I'm looking forward to next year. I didn't hear much about high school sports, so I kind of threw my name in the hat and said, hey, guys, maybe I could help you with the high school sports part of it. Right. And so maybe we'll be able to do something with them in the future.
Yeah, it was definitely a vibe that you got that has kind of been building over the last couple of years that I think has been happening in just in the volume space. There's a lot of technology happening, a lot of business processes happening, a lot of changes in the way volume and sports photography companies are doing business, right? Where they're kind of marketing direct to parents and coaches and superintendents a little more differently than they were in the past.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they had a superintendent actually come and speak from the Houston area and kind of gave us a lot of insight on what's going on in the market and what they're looking for. And also clarifying to us how important school pictures still are. Right. It's not something that's going away. So that was exciting to listen to him as well.
That was one of the things I think that I really learned, having been involved myself with SPOA for over a year now, but just understanding how important school photos are to the actual schools and districts themselves as a piece of technology, as a piece of information that they need. And the way they were able to get school photography determined as an essential business, I think, was a turning point, I think, for the industry.
Yeah, and see, doing sports photography, I wasn't even aware of that.
Right.
To SPOA and heard how, and it makes a lot of sense now because a lot of these school photography companies to be out of business for a year and a half.
Right.
Again, SPOA stepped up.
Yeah.
And made it happen. And what's really neat, Gary, is taking it to another level. We're talking about school and sports. One of the things that, and then yearbooks, one of the things that photographers tend to not enjoy doing is the events, going shooting the football games and the volleyball games and wrestling and having to do all these events. I hooked up with Candid Color. They have a process called Now Candid.
Right.
You can actually go out and make some money.
Right.
Doing those type of events where you actually shoot. What I would do is go out and you shoot each one of the students, say that are playing on the, let's say the volleyball team in the fall. Take a head of each one and get their information. And now shoot action shots of them actually playing. And the facial recognition will actually pull them out, put it into a file. Mom's sitting in the stands. Now mom can be looking at pictures that you're shooting of her kid who's playing on the court. And that's something nobody's been able to do before. So really excited adding that feature to school and sports photography.
So let's talk a little bit about that. There's been a lot of things happening in the sports area specifically, with people trying to make money off action photography, right? Like, everyone's familiar with GF Crew with what they're doing with sort of the paid model, getting away from the spray and pray sort of model. This Now Candid idea, that's more along that line where you're not just spraying and praying, right? I mean, you're actually targeting parents. Is that correct? Or the photographer could target parents if that's what they wanted to do. Yeah,
the method that Glossy's doing is something that we, Gump Sports Photography, Spotlight Photographics 15 years ago, we would go out and we would go to the meeting before the tournament. We would have forms, and each coach would give it to the team mom. Team mom would hand them out to all the players on the team.
Yeah.
We would ask them for $10 and when their next game was and what number and so forth. They would turn them in, and we would send photographers to the different fields, which is very similar to what Glossy is doing.
Right.
That's the only way it's going to work. So Glossy's doing is fantastic. What we're doing here with Now Candid is we're shooting them. These are our customers. I mean, we already have to shoot that game.
Right.
Period. It's part of the contract. Now we have an opportunity to make a few dollars from shooting it. Instead of in the past, we shoot it, we give the images to the yearbook. The yearbook uses 2 of those images for the yearbook. Nobody ever sees any of the other images. Now this gives the photographer an opportunity to make some money on all those events that they're photographing, where in the past they couldn't.
So what is the output option for that? Because you always hear about, if you're selling sports photography, that there isn't a lot of opportunity for output, right? Actual tangible products. You're basically selling something that a kid can put on his Max Preps profile or something like that, or share on social media. But I would think there's still an opportunity there for hard copy output of some sort.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the seniors. You know, you're getting photographs that they can put in their applications for going off to college. That's a big deal. But we're having a lot of people that are doing digital downloads.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that are doing hard copy.
Right.
Still 8x10s and 5.7s are still popular, not as popular as they used to be in this situation.
Right.
But they're able to see their images before they order. And that way, we always say, shoot to sell. If you're a good photographer and you're shooting good images, then you're going to make good money.
Sure.
To where a lot of times the school photographers will send somebody out to do the team photos that just spent all day photographing headshots, secondary headshots or elementary headshots. And they're like, oh man, now I got to go shoot a football game, or I got to go shoot a volleyball game. And they're not as much as into it as photographers who specialize in sports.
Right. You know, one of the things that SPOA did that was kind of interesting is they had their national photo contest, and you could see the examples of the work there. And I was impressed from the sports standpoint, what photographers are doing for, there's smoke machines and there's graphics and there's all this stuff. Does that stuff really sell? I mean, is that really what you need to be in, is sort of the special effects side of the sports photo market?
Most of that, what you're seeing is what the companies are doing for their senior photos.
Right, exactly.
And in the studio. So they're not sports photos like we're shooting, where we're going out and shooting banners and team photos. They're, like you said, manipulating them with smoke and gels and stuff like that. They're trying to make the big bucks. I mean, market down here, I mean, they're selling, $1,200 to $1,500 packages to these seniors.
Yeah.
They want to be different. They have to do that type of photography. I haven't had anyone in the high school senior situation in a long time, so I haven't had to go to the studios that done. So I really can't speak on what they're ordering from senior picture day, but we don't go to that extent when we're doing high school picture.
I hear different things in the market about where the sweet spot is. Like, you can't make money in high school. It's all club sports or things like that. What is your opinion on that sort of belief that you should focus on one or the other?
Gary, it's one of those things that something that David actually said in Houston. He said that depending on how good the team is and how they respect their coach and the authority within their school, tend to be the schools who spend the most money.
Right.
And I agree with that 100%. It's all about how the students, the athletes respect their coach and respect their program. And if you're working with more schools like that, your buy rates are going to go up quite a bit more. Now, when you're doing high school banners, which is a business all in itself, that's a tradition type thing. That means now most high schools, because that was 10 years ago when that started, have started a tradition, and they will continue to buy these banners. Now, what's happened in that market, unfortunately, is it came out at $150 for a 4x6 banner 10 years ago. And now it's gotten down to where they're doing them for $75. And you got photographers doing them for free and giving them as part of the commission back to the school. So that market's been hurt a lot.
Yeah.
However, you're still going to have those schools who have a good program, who, as I said, respect their faculty, their coaches, and they tend to, the buy rate is quite a bit more than those who don't. So focus on those.
Right.
Sometimes you don't have a choice. You got to take the good with the bad.
Right.
But I typically try to focus on those schools.
Well, that makes sense. You want to focus on, the optimal customer. But like you said, if you've got a contract with a district, you've got to do it, right? And that's one of the challenges with volume, right?
But Gary, all I've done since 1988, 34 years, is volume.
Mm-hmm.
No, I did in the beginning, we had to do weddings, we had to do boudoir, all those kind of things in the beginning to get our feet wet. But that was 83 to 85. But then in 88, I realized that volume was where it was.
Right.
And the success of volume is the people who work for you, your staff, right, the people you surround yourself with, because all these big companies, we're only one individual. We might be the management, but unless we surround ourselves with good photographers, good personnel in the office and so forth, it's a struggle in this business. And that's why so many little guys in the business where it's just a husband and wife or a husband by himself doing it by himself.
Yeah.
They don't know about staffing. They just want to do everything themselves.
Yeah.
But for me, it couldn't be that way.
Right.
I had Orlando, Tampa, and Jacksonville at one time, and I had to have people at all different locations. So I depended on all my staff, and without them, I was nothing.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges that I kind of learned from talking to people at SPOA was, with a certain implosion of a very large player happening in the marketplace, creating opportunities for smaller people to get accounts. It's also a double-edged sword because you have to staff those accounts, and buying photographers right now is very, very difficult.
Yeah, we see that on social media every day where these photographers are talking about, how difficult it is. It was interesting also. I'm sure you're familiar with Pat Cahill, his daughter.
Sure.
She had a picture on social media today, and it was a staff photo.
Right.
Every person in that photo, and let's say there were 30 staff members, every one of them were female.
Right.
And a male in the group. And
interesting.
Believe it or not, Gary, my office staff and 90% of my photographers were female as well.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are college kids.
And why is that? Why does that? I'm just curious why you think that's the case.
I think punctuality was important. The penmanship was very important. In my business, we're dealing with children, and the female is the mom role, the teacher role. And it just worked out great. I'm
old enough to remember when there was a lot of, and there still is, some sexism in the place where, women can't shoot sports. That's crazy, but it's really more of a connection, especially when you're doing volume. You've got a very short time to connect with somebody. And I would say that women have an advantage on that in that regard. I would say now, Gary, that half or more than half of the photographers in the market right now are female. This is no longer a male dominated profession anymore. In my market here, we have 4 companies that work the market, and 2 of them are female and 2 of them are male. Right. Interesting. My salespeople, they were female. They were moms, and they were compassionate. Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the things I don't know if you had a chance to see Cindy Gallion's presentation at MVP from Photo Texas, but she was talking about how she started in the business, and a lot of it was empathy towards the subject, the student that student was the most important person in the world to the mom. And the job was to get the best picture possible for the mom. Absolutely. And it needs to be the most important person in the world to that photographer during that 3 or 4 minutes as well. Right. Exactly. Yeah, I agree. So I'm just curious. Now, we talked a little bit about technology, but we haven't really talked about it on the capture side. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening on the capture side with, mirrorless cameras coming into play. You've got, a lot of, Bluetooth, wireless transmission, direct to the cloud stuff happening. Is this fundamentally changing the business, or is it just, the latest gadget?
Well, when you have the mirrorless, it allows you to shoot high-speed sync.
Right.
A lot of photographers really like shooting the high-speed sync.
And for those of us who aren't photographers, what does high-speed sync mean?
So in the past, if you were shooting a photograph with a flash on camera or a strobe, most you could get in your flash sync was 250th of a second.
Right.
So the problem was the background of the photograph was washed out typically. With the high-speed sync, you no longer have that limitation of 250. There are guys shooting at 2,500. Darkening the background, making the pictures richer. It's unbelievable what it does, but most of that is done outside from what the high-speed sync is done at outdoors type photography. Tim McDonald, Jay Boatwright really have it down really nice. And I haven't gone to the mirrorless. That's why I'm talking to Samantha about into mirrorless from Nikon and Fuji. Not that I don't love their cameras, but I'm gonna have a Sony in my hand probably in the next couple of weeks.
Right.
I'll play with it, but all my peers are doing it, so I'm just a little late to the game.
When you think about what digital can do, and I think the mirrorless platform specifically allows more of the fulfillment of the digital potential, because not only can you do some of the things like you were talking about, but like I said, you can do wireless transmission directly from the camera, directly to the cloud, and you can also do some cool things with video. And are you seeing anyone really monetizing video very well in sports?
None of my peers
right
doing it on a regular basis, just more of marketing, marketing business, but I haven't really seen many people doing it. And selling the product. I'd like to see more of that. I think that's exciting. But again, you got to find the person that's willing to pay the money for it, because it's a lot more time, a lot more effort, to give a finished product.
Because I've seen some things out there, like especially for like soccer and things like that, where there's people like putting automated cameras and it uses AI to follow the ball. So it like records an entire game going back and forth. And so it's capturing video that way. But I don't know how other than using some sort of AI or something to identify specific people and players, then pulling them out or doing a highlight reel or something. I'm sure the technology is out there to do it, but then who's going to pay for it is the challenge.
It is definitely out there. I'm real good friends with the photographer for the Jaguars, Rick Wilson, and we were just talking about it the other day, where he can go in and when he's shooting and find a subject, let's say a wide receiver, and lock in on that wide receiver, and as he's going down the field, it's still locked in, and he can shoot and shoot and shoot, so that it doesn't go out of focus, back in focus. So that's what look at all these wonderful, wonderful photos you're seeing. A lot of that is that technology. Hello, you still got to spend $10,000 for the camera, so it's
right. Exactly. Well, and honestly, that's what they've had to do to kind of offset the smartphone incursion right into a lot of this. Because if you're going to be a professional photographer, you got to be able to do something a smartphone can't.
Absolutely. And I tell you, I'm seeing the smartphones everywhere I go.
Yeah.
It's
do you think it'll ever get to a point where the iPhone 14 or 15 will maybe an accessory lens of some sort? I'm having a hard time seeing where that's competitive to a Nikon with a 400 to 1200 can compete with that. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
I could see it happening in video easier than stills. You still got to know the game. Yeah. You see all these parents on the sidelines. You see parents on the sidelines. You see professionals on the sidelines. And unless you know the game and you know what's about to happen, so you can get for it, the professional sports guy is still going to have a great role. And I don't see the phones taking that role at all.
So you sound like you're pretty bullish on sports volume photography as a category moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I've done for the last 12 years, is more in the high school level.
Yeah.
I mean, youth, I pretty much got the youth down, but we're constantly learning new things on the high school level.
Sure.
We started doing composites, team photo composites. Candid actually started that 18 years ago.
Right.
But it was very expensive to do.
Yeah.
So they kind of started that. Now we're all doing it, or at least I'd say 80% of photographers are shooting in a controlled environment and creating composites. And that is definitely going to be here to stay. You'll get some schools that you'll go to, you'll show it to them. They'll say, nope, we're traditional. We still want to team up in the risers, and so be it. But it's crazy. Right. There are so many photographers that are doing controlled environments indoors that when you tell them to go outdoors and do an outdoor event, they're lost. Crazy.
Right.
They forgot 5-6 years ago was when we kind of all went indoors, even more so when COVID came,
right,
shooting everybody individually. So now that's kind of the thing, doing the composites, but there are still photography companies whose employees a certain age, maybe they've been with, the big companies, maybe they've been there for 30 years.
Right.
And they're used to doing it outside, doing the group photos outdoors with natural lighting. And now you're telling them we're no longer doing that. You're going in the studio. And
right.
A lot of pushback on those type of photographers. And I think some of those are just retiring off. And the new ones coming in and taking their place.
So where are the best sources, do you think, if you're interested in getting in this business, whether let's say you're an independent photo store and you want to get into sports, and you're a volume photographer and you want to get into sports, what are some of the best sources for information that you look for, other than Gump Solutions, of course?
That's a good question, because you can't learn it online on Facebook.
Right.
So many people get in these groups and they think they're going to get all their questions answered. The questions are just absolutely crazy what people on these social media sites and ask.
Yeah, I'm in a couple of those groups and I agree. It's interesting.
One of the things that Texas School, are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah.
Texas School has, last year they had about 32 different instructors, and they do a school for 1 week. One instructor, 25 students, and all they do is spend that 1 week learning every aspects from youth and high school to karate schools to dance studios to graduations to photo booths, all these different segments where you get like 3 hours. There is one segment in the afternoon, and you get this for 5 days. That's a great resource. Sometimes they have a school guy. Sometimes they have a sports guy. So that's something that I would highly recommend people to look into. And then, during the summer, there was a couple events this summer. Got to be careful, because some of the events that are being hosted, some of them have agendas.
Right. Well, of course. Yeah.
And, so they're trying to sell something or trying to get you to go one way or the other. Find a mentor.
Right.
I mean, I found so many people have helped me over the years in my business, where I would fly out to California and I would stay for a weekend and I would learn something from School and Sports. Randy Long was out there many, many years ago, and he taught me. And I've done the same thing. I've taught so many people, shared so many ideas. Eric does the same thing. A lot of us do. And most of these guys I'm talking about will invite you to come into their world for a few days and out without charging you anything. Just, somebody helped every one of us. So most of us have no problem helping out.
If someone was interested in learning more about you and Gump Solutions, where would they go?
GumpSolutions.com is our website. So Gump Solutions would be our website, and that would be where you can go for consulting. If you have a big plan, you're in the school photography business, your sports isn't doing well. Some of them, believe it or not, have not even gone into the digital era. Sports. And so they really want to go in and learn that type of thing, or they want to learn about trends that are going on. We can help them in that aspect there. and come to our speaking volume site.
Mm-hmm.
It's Eric and I. You have to be invited. So, you come on, and if we see that you qualify and you're not just somebody there that's a tire kicker, we'll bring you in. And this summer, there's an event in Memphis, which is, again, a 3-day event. It's put on by Candid Color as well. It's going to be actually at Graceland, 3 weeks. Okay. So there's lots.
Elvis wasn't much of an athlete, though.
Well,
he did do karate, and that's about it, I think.
You got me on that one. That's funny.
So anyway, tell me a little bit more about that event.
That's an event. It's their 50th anniversary.
Okay, great.
50 years. And so they're bringing in customers.
Mm-hmm.
They're bringing in customers and potential customers to come in and kind of look at their program.
Sure.
It's a celebratory type event.
Yeah, sure.
50 years. But Candid is also part of the TSS. TSS is the sports section, which is a franchise.
Right.
So it'll be two different groups, the TSS and the Candid, and we just kind of get together and talk about what's working, because with the new software, being able to photograph a kid and instantly have that photograph in 2 minutes go up to the cloud on mom's phone, mom being able to order in 2 minutes.
Right.
And not having any post-production at all.
Right.
A dream of a school photographer and a sports photographer.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Jeff, for your time. Looking forward to hopefully seeing you in some of those events coming up. And best wishes for shooting this summer.
Well, I appreciate it very much. And look forward to running into you again. 30 years we've known each other.
Well, this is an industry that people tend to grow old and die in. So, but it's still vibrant. That's what's fun.
And lastly, I just want to do a shout out to Tom Hayes and Tom Crawford, both mentors of mine. They both kind of semi-retired over the years, but they both helped me out in my youth. And Ralph Romagera, those are guys that really were influential in my career, and I owe a lot to them.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.